There is not a single class that uses more macros than the warrior. Because of the stance mechanic, you need so many buttons to do even the most basic things that without macros, your rotation would be really hard to pull off. So from the most casual to the most tryhard, every single person has a bunch of macros. And this is all the ones that I use, all the ones that I could feasibly use. I will have a lot of macros here. And my hope with this video is that I will teach you how these macros work in such a way that you are gonna learn how to make your own macros to fit your custom needs. The macro rabbit hole is very deep. Now I was gonna actually show you the macros in game, but the resolution on the text was absolute crap, so I figured it would be way easier to see if I just open the document here. Now some basic principles about macros. First of all, you guys show tooltip. If you put the question mark icon on a macro, there is only gonna be an icon in that macro when your tooltip actually has something to show. So for example, this macro only will use defensive stance if I am not in defensive stance. So right now the macro cannot cast anything. But if I go out of defensive stance, it can do defensive stance. And if you see here, there you go, the icon changed. It will also show here. So this is a great way to see if your macro is working. You put show tooltip on it, and the tooltip in the bar should show you what the macro is gonna do. Of course, the macro is like any other ability. You just grab it and put it in your bars, and there you go. Now, another thing you can do is you put show tooltip and space and the ability. For example, show tooltip, I don't know, Sunder Armor. And this macro will only show the tooltip for Sunder Armor, even if it is not going to be casted, and that's going to be useful in some situations. We're going to go over those macros in a second. Another macro that you want to use in almost any macro is going to be start attack. You should put this line below show tooltip, and that's also very important. Enter is actually a line. Every single one of these lines is a line of code in the macro. A space is not going to do, it has to be an enter. Start attack will make it so if you are not auto attacking yet, you're going to start auto attacking your target. And that way, if you put it in every ability, you're not going to have to start right clicking the mob every time you want to attack. It's gonna make it a little easier. This heroic strike macro right here, you replace your heroic strike button for this macro, and there you go. Every time you do heroic strike, you're gonna start attacking. You should make a similar macro for almost any ability in the game if you can. But very well, let's talk about all the macros that I think you're gonna use. If you are a tank, another important line you gotta put in every macro if you can help it is gonna be shield block, okay? Shield block makes it so you get a guaranteed block after the hit, and that's very important because if you don't, you're gonna get crit and there's a good chance you're gonna die if you're tanking a boss. So for a lot of people, just putting it in the macro so you never forget about it. You put it on your Sunder Armor, on your Revenge, or your Bloodthirst, whatever, and that way you never forget to use it. It is not on the GCD, so when an ability is not on the GCD and you put it on the line, it will cast and it's not gonna mess with anything, so you can just put it on the bottom there. So yes, if you're a tank, you should definitely put shield block in everything you can. Super important that you never forget to have it. And the best part is, if you do not have a shield, if you're like the Fury Prot guy with dual wield, it doesn't matter because you're not gonna have a shield, so it's not gonna do anything. Now this macro will be mostly for people that are leveling currently, and that's gonna be the overpower macro. As you guys know, you can only do overpower in battle stance. Show tooltip overpower is gonna always show overpower in the button, and that's good because that way you can know the cooldown of overpower, and if it is usable. Start attack, of course, you put it everywhere. And here, cast. This modifier in here, this little thing in brackets is called a modifier. If I am not in stance 1, that means battle stance, okay? Let me write that down. Stance 1 is battle stance, stance 2 is defensive stance, and stance 3 is berserker stance. Remember those numbers, we are gonna use them a lot. Now what this bracket means is that if I am not in stance 1, so if I am not in battle stance, it's gonna do battle stance, of course. And then below it, just cast overpower, because we're gonna overpower, we're gonna go to battle stance if we are not in it, and then we do overpower. One thing you gotta understand about stance macros is that changing a stance will not trigger the GCD, but if you are on the GCD, you cannot use a stance. You gotta wait for the 1.5 seconds to go over until you can swap a stance. So if you put an ability after changing a stance, you're gonna get the ability off immediately. But if you put it before, the stance is not gonna change. A lot of people mess that up. A lot of people are like, why is the macro not working? It's because you put overpower before. Another little cool macro here. This is something I use. I do not know any people that use this macro. Maybe they should. This is a simple macro. When I am not in combat, that's no combat here, I am gonna charge, because you can only charge when you're auto combat. And then this little semicolon here, semicolon and space means if this condition is not met, do this. That's what it means, right? So if I am not in combat, I'm gonna charge. And if I am in combat, I'm gonna hamstring. I like using hamstring and battle stance in the same button because they are always in battle stance. You can use a different ability than hamstring to put in that macro if you want, but you should definitely use something else than charge in the charge button, so that way you can save a button. You can use the same keybind for two things very reliably. And that's the main thing that macros do. They save keybinds because, as you guys know, you got a keyboard, right? This part over here, the Q, the E, all those keys over here, this is prime real estate. So the more keybinds you need, the more uncomfortable, the more slow, the more inconvenient it is to press other buttons. And the more keys you can save, the less keys you can use. That's gonna be the more effective you are at pressing buttons, the more easy it is to play. And this macro is just to save one more button. There is a lot of button saving macros. I like hamstring too because you are never gonna use hamstring not in combat, because how do you do hamstring? You just right click a mob and you do it, right? You're always gonna be in combat. Now the next macro on the list is gonna be the swap to shield macro. This macro is very, very important. Every warrior, even if you're a DPS, you gotta have this macro. And why this macro is so important? Well, imagine you're a DPS and you're pumping the boss, right? You're doing a lot of damage. You get like 4 crits in a row. You're killing it. All of a sudden, you pull aggro. If you do not swap to a shield, there is a very good chance that your little warrior with your two-hander or your dual wield, you're gonna get destroyed, you're gonna die. So being able to swap to a shield immediately is gonna keep you alive. You're gonna be able to survive getting pwned by the boss. And of course, you just hold the boss until the tank picks it back up. Ideally, you reposition so the boss is on the same, looking at the same direction as it used to be, you know that stuff. But yes, this is your oh crap button. This is your oh my god, I'm gonna die, I gotta pop this, and there you go. It will trigger the GCD because changing a weapon will trigger the GCD and you will lose your rage. That shouldn't be a problem because the boss is gonna hit you and you're gonna get all the rage back. So what this macro does, if you do not have a shield equipped, this modifier is really neat. You're gonna go into defensive stance. Remember, always do the stance first, so that way you're not gonna trigger the GCD. Then, if you do not have a shield equipped, you're gonna equip your shield. Okay, the way you put this line in the macro, let me take that into the game really quick. So we replace this quotated your shield line, that's just a placeholder, and you're gonna go to your bags, and we just hold shift and we click on the shield. And there you go, it's gonna type the exact name of the shield. That's how you put an item into a macro. Then we do the semicolon, the space, and we put the main hunter weapon of choice, the corpse maker. Now I got a good weapon right there. So what this macro is gonna do very quickly, if I am in battle stance, I got my DPS weapon, I press it, and I am defensive stance, and I got a shield. There you go, in a single button, I put on a shield and I change to defensive stance, so I am able to survive the boss. All you have to do is put the name of your shield and the name of your offhand weapon if you're a dual wielder. It is tedious because every time you get a new shield or every time you get a new weapon, you're gonna have to change that line in the macro once again. I get it, there is not a great way around that. There used to be in the old vanilla client, believe it or not, but you cannot put actual Lua code in macros anymore, and that's for the better. You could make some really crazy stuff back in the day. If you do not have an offhand because you're a two-hander warrior, you can just get rid of this line, it doesn't really matter. Of course, if you put your main hand weapon here, your two-hander, it will also work. And the second line here is for your main hander weapon. So if, let's say you're a dual wielder and you got like a weapon for tanking, a fast weapon, and a weapon for DPSing, you can swap those weapons here really quick immediately. If you're just a DPSer that doesn't want to die to the boss, it doesn't matter, shouldn't pay too much attention, just use the same weapon. But yeah, I wanted to make the complete macro in case you actually want to see how it works. Amazing macro, everybody needs this macro. If it saves your life once, I have done my job. And hey, if you're playing hardcore and you're gonna do a dungeon and you're a DPS warrior, you really want to get this macro. I know you people, you get one shot and then you blame the healer. Now this is another macro that's kinda cool, the disarming macro. Is very simple really. You just go into defensive stance if you're not in defensive stance and you cast Disarm. Disarm is a crucial ability in a lot of situations, especially in dungeons. There are some bosses you can disarm. You can also do it in PvP, of course. PvP disarm is really freaking annoying because if somebody doesn't have a weapon, they cannot do a lot of abilities. So this little macro will make it so you can just disarm on a single button. No need to press on the stances. Now this macro is a little fancier. This macro is the universal interrupt, I call it. Warriors have two interrupts. If you're in defensive stance, you can do shield bash, which you need a shield for. And if you're in berserker stance, you can do pommel, which is the same interrupt but just for like a DPSer. This macro is gonna work whether you're tanking or DPSing. It that's what makes it so cool. You put your interrupt in a single keybind, and it is very important that you put interrupt in the same keybind for every character, because that way you can get the muscle memory out. You really want to be able to react quickly when you get an interrupt. I always put my interrupts in the F key, for example, because if I am playing a shaman or if I'm playing a mage or a warrior, I want to be able to hit the same button every time and interrupt and react quickly. So this button, if you are in stance 1, that is battle stance, you're gonna go to berserker stance, and that way you can pommel. That's why I put this line at the end that says pommel. If you are in defensive stance, you're gonna do shield bash, and if you are in berserker stance, of course, you're just gonna do pommel. Actually, this line is not even necessary. There you go. Made it shorter. It should work either way, but there you go. One less line, one less line. That's probably some vestigial thing from like a really old macro I made. This is another macro that's super useful. That's gonna be the Berserker Rage macro. Berserker Rage makes it so you're immune to fears, and you also generate more rage when you get hit. It doesn't matter. What matters is that Berserker Rage makes you immune to fear. There is a lot of mechanics, especially in the Horde, because Fear Ward doesn't exist in the Horde, that you gotta break through a fear. If you're tanking Nefarian and you get feared, you turn your back against the wall and you die. So this macro, in a single button, you're gonna go into Berserker Stance and you're gonna do Berserker Rage. Berserker Rage is on the GCD, but this way you can do it in a single button. As a tank, I am so lazy that if I gotta go to Berserker Rage, I just use this macro to save a keybind. I do not recommend you do that if you're a DPSer though. I am gonna have a different macro for stance dancing DPSers, but as a tank, this is my Berserker Stance key. It's my key. I just Berserker Rage every time, because why else are you gonna go to Berserker Rage as a tank? That's pretty much the only reason. That way I save myself a button. I could get like one of those mice that got like 20 buttons in here. You know, that could work. I just don't like them. So the less keybinds, the better. Now this is what I call a communicating macro. Okay, this is also very important if you're a tank, for example. Challenging Jout is your AoE taunt. This macro is gonna take you to defensive stance, so you take less damage, and then you're gonna do an AoE taunt. And the line I put below is you're gonna yell that you AoE taunted, so the healers know that you're taking all the aggro. That's very important that the healers immediately know you're gonna get destroyed, because a lot of people AoE taunt, they do not tell anybody, and then the healers do not know, so he dies, and then the guy's like, oh, the healers suck, man. I got one shot, it's all their fault. So yeah, you gotta communicate in the macro, you gotta tell everybody that you're AoE taunting when you do. And I also like putting this little thing here, 10-minute cooldown. You may wonder, why would you say that it's a 10-minute cooldown? Like, why does it matter? That's just a personal thing. When I pop a cooldown, I like telling people it's a big cooldown, so that way the people are like, oh, stuff is going down, okay, we gotta focus up. You know, like, if you pop shield wall, you gotta make people understand, this is a big deal. You gotta make the healers understand, oh, there is a lot of damage going down. He popped the big cooldown, I gotta focus up. It just makes the interpersonal things a little easier to deal with. That's why I put 10-minute cooldown on that line. I could not find a good add-on or Wikora in vanilla to communicate it, because back in the old private server client, there used to be like an add-on that would tell everybody when you AoE taunted, when you shield walled, everything. It was called Tank Buddy, I think. The add-on doesn't exist in Classic, and I miss it so goddamn much. So if you got a good add-on for it, if you got a good replacement, please let me know. And this right here is gonna be the same macro. This is gonna be shield wall, and once again it's gonna call out you pop shield wall. It is 75% damage reduction right there, and 30-minute cooldown once again, so the healers can know, oh, he popped the big cooldown, he must be taking a lot of damage, I better make sure he doesn't die. That's what that means. You can make another one for last 10, for example, for everything. Really, you really want to get everybody to know. Now this is gonna be a very important macro for every DPSer. That's gonna be all the cooldowns macro, because remember guys, you wanna pop all your cooldowns at the same time. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to zoom out, it's way too long. Death Wish is 20% damage, and Recklessness is like 100% crit, so you wanna have them at the same time, so they multiply off each other and you get more value out of all of them, you know, at the same time. You gotta do it at the same time. This macro is gonna pop your trinkets right here. Use 13 and use 14, that's your bottom trinket and your top trinket, if I recall correctly. You wanna use your trinkets and your cooldowns at the same time, obviously. Then you are gonna do a cast sequence macro. What does cast sequence mean? Well, you press it once and you do this line over here, you press it again, you do this line over here, and you press it again and you get this line over here. So you can press 3 abilities in quick succession. Now, reset 5, that means that if you do not press it for 5 seconds, it's gonna reset to the first line again. So this line over here, the first one, that's your Blood Fury, that's the Orc racial. Or you can put Berserking here if you're a troll, okay, your racial cooldown, your DPS cooldown. If you do not have a racial, you are not gonna put it in the macro, it doesn't matter. Then we're gonna put Death Wish, that's your Fury cooldown, 20% more damage. And then we're gonna put Recklessness. You do not have to put Recklessness in here because that's a 30-minute cooldown, and if you only wanna pop it when you really want to, you should get it on a different keybind. But if you're lazy, you can put it here just to make sure you keep using it. But this right here, you pop all your cooldowns and you pop your Death Wish, and that way you make sure you get all the value you need. Very important macro for every DPSer. Now this is gonna be a very important macro. This is what I recommend every DPSer uses, is the toggle macro. A toggle macro works like this flashlight. You press it once and you're in one state, on. You press it another time and you're in another state, off. What this macro does is, if you are in Berserker stance, you press it once and you go to Battle stance. But if you're in Battle stance, you press it again and you go into Berserker stance. So that way, if you are a DPSer, you can effectively do Battle stance and Berserker stance in a single button. Really amazing macro. Now this macro is gonna take you to Battle stance and do a Thunderclap. That's mainly for tanking. Like, a DPSer should be keeping Thunderclap on the boss at all times, but they never freaking do. And it pisses me off. Because you lose all your tanking rage, you take more damage, you lose threat, it just sucks. It just sucks. Keep Thunderclap on the boss, please. But yeah, you gotta have this macro if you're a tank. This is gonna be the same macro, but for sweeping strikes. If you're leveling, you just go into battle stance and you get sweeping strikes off. Very simple. You should replace your sweeping strikes button for this one. And this macro over here is gonna be a macro I make for the memes. I think it's super funny. This is mostly for when you hit like level 37 and you got a Ravager in your hands, but it works for every dungeon. This is what I call the Hiroshima and Nagasaki macro. Retaliation is a 30-minute cooldown that when you get hit, you throw a hit back at whoever hits you. Challenging Shout is an AoE taunt. If you got a big two-hander and you're doing a big pull and you pop Retaliation and then you taunt all the mobs to hit you, you're gonna do a quadrillion damage. Are you gonna live through the quadrillion damage because they are gonna hit you? I don't know. That's probably something you wanna talk to your healers about. But oh my god, when this thing goes off, isn't it hilarious? That's more of the meme macro. I like closing stuff on the meme. It's funnier this way. But that's gonna be all the macros. We're gonna make a mega post in the Discord, in the Warrior channel. It's gonna have every single macro from this video and more. I got an entire library of Warrior stuff in that place. We are also streaming on Twitch now. Check it out on the bottom comments. It's gonna be there. You can check it out. Follow me, goddammit. And subscribe. Join the Discord. And thank you for watching.